se de phala ho Om Ai Namo Guru Benzatrika Telo Cha Nathar Inna Shiri Mula Guru Mahamudra Siddhi Phala Hom ta se de phala hong Trên trời tôi men dám lê trên cho bé to son yon la cha son mê chân vai do dê choi phan chi ten quân bu xa lai ti ta te sam ju che le me shan ji lo shi tu je je ning ge mo ba sa ni choi sem tu tal te to para shen ji lo
Hello, Angela.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. So now let's restart.
Okay. Sanji Chudan Zoji Chonam Lai Janju Dane Jabzun Je Tage Jinso Jibe Sunam Dola Penjire Sanji Dumbar
Until awakening, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Until awakening, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings.
Mahanamga Danyambe Samjen Tamjen Deva Dan Deve Judan Dembra Juru Jen Donghe Dan Donghe Jen Judan Devra Juru Donghe Mebe Deva Dan Mendra Juru Jen Heren Chadan Yedan Jur Danyum La Nebra Juru Jen
May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness which is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness which is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion.
Gewai Jungze Dagi Jisamba Tamje Zobe Chanju Chemburu.
Whatever slight virtues I have accumulated through prostration, offering, confession, rejoicing, beseeching, and requesting, I dedicate it all for the sake of complete enlightenment.
Dalu lonju nazi yongxie la la me choge nguru daldu zu ume nguru dewa drage rena mendra la barde zaye soha.
The ground is sprinkled with scented water and strewn with flowers. It is adorned with Meru, the supreme mountain, the four continents, and the sun and the moon. As a Buddha field, I offer it. May all sentient beings attain the happiness of the Buddha fields. To the lamas who possess the three kayas, I offer the outer, inner, and secret offerings. With my body, wealth, and all that is visible, please grant me the supreme realization, enlightenment.
Isimje namje samba dhan loye chedra chedra wa chechon tenma tenpa ye chuje ngolo ngoldo so.
Please turn the wheel of the Dharma of the greater and lesser vehicles and the teachings common to both, according to the dispositions and mental capacities of sentient beings.
Kanshi ngurwe dunga jo tolong yankara gawale rolan zebe kaju rinpo che jeba nambran tabe jen jen chenlap je chu jen jazu jimbe yandra se me je je manam ja jewa yung alen je drebe duje jima me be lama damba nang la cha dar jen jo da jeb zan jewa jen je la bran jen do so dor jen jewa de lo na ro dang man me da ko ren je den ga ga ne sun den zabe la me sha da ju lama ye dam chu zong Survande so da ju chenje lo en chenze nga da demba do sanje gandur mong bar den la mara shar du je lang jen tarbe lam dam ba yong zen shin ye nang la ge chan la da la me mam je wang bo dang je jen la so ju je cho la ja wa che ba nam san je song ra ro de shi jen de we ju ju ro ta dan che ji tam be chu nyen bar yang de shi 오야다 남가다 냠베 심제 탐지지 턴도 네 도잘라 남에버 양답으로 저거 상지게 공부한 한번 진행장 도버차 네 대체도 다 담배추 사모 줄진도 되는 주버지고 냠베드네 삼바 창중초도 되는 심제바 살다베 보내드네 심바나로 쇼.
So first, please cultivate the supreme motivation of bodhicitta, thinking that may all sentient beings, limitless as space, attain the unsurpassed state of perfect enlightenment. And for that sake, I shall engage in the practice of the profound Dharma properly. So please first bring to mind clearly such a motivation of bodhicitta.
다 telā, tēne, 다 shūra chewe ki chūde, tēne karare sōngde zāne 다 tērēng, ngānsu tēne guñchen rinzhen chūdā ki sōngbe, tēne nyingdam sumchū sōngā pāta 다 shūra chewe kāp, tēne chī yīmbarwa, tē yīngdi zāne 다 nyingdam sumchū sōngē nāne, tēne kāsēng nyingdam chūshī yīngche shū sīmbar rō chīre, 다 대량 배치는 막 인담 정안에 우수되는 쇼라시와다 근데 임바래.
And so the Dharma we are discussing today is a text by the omniscient Rinpoche Shugyadapa, and it's called the 35 Heartfelt Advices. And of these 35 verses, we have recently completed verse number 14. And so we will continue today with verse number 15.
다되네 단단히 지당한 거는 중 다지 넘버 산제바 세인드산에 되네 산제라 잡순로와 겐드나 잡순로와 다 출라 잡순로와 너나 teneji goncho sumla japsun dronken chigla tene namba sanje pa sene song yongwa ta ti indu zane jidan teneji ta goncho sumla japsun rowa zamji namba sanje betela chu yore tene yinaya ta yang chu ba zamji tene riwarwe sana ta peche mendibarwa tichi du ta kare gogre sana zowo sanje di tene songjawa di tenjawe lamdela tene nga sun jugu yorwa ten du ngarang choge tumba sanji chumden de de miksege tene chechu kari yore sengdu zane tene sanjegi korange tene chida karwa thame mambola chosa jebajang tendela tene ta tobjan tar tubaji toba sanjegi kompang sene daji dona penne tene siba kangson kurwe dunghe 용수 조바 되는지 자료에 산지기 공방 세야지 문은 제나와와 톱나와래 다 된대기 토백이 산지기 공방대 그런 지부마도 현달라 토야 맹게 마인바 너는 알아서 남가다님 bes음체 탐제라 된대기 산지기 공방 토야기 느바여바 산지기 공방 토야기 주여바 된대지 산지기 첸도와 첸네 드네 산지기 투제와 첨부고네 다 저랑조 드네 산지기 공방 드네지 토버 제구이나 드네 테 토버 제발라 주단 젠망보 참고를 자네 자외기 드네 주 대신 행보 세야데 딱 나랑도 참말라 드네 징총요레스 산지 코르기 줄여베 대신 행보당 심쟁기 줄여베 대신 행보 되니라 체버 매바 장애 매바 이와 매바 된대지 임바레 임반 대 산지게 땡네 다 된대게 되네 데버시베 힘보테 문도 줄이하게 체도 되네 가르고 그래서나 다 소놈게 초단 이시게 초 싸고 그래스 취를 되네지 쉬고 그래스 람냠술 랭고 그래서는 산지게 다 취지 본부 지티시동 되네지 송나 연구여와
And normally, so as Buddhist practitioners, so we go for refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and in the Sangha. And so in brief, somebody who goes to refuge in the three jewels is what we call a Buddhist. And so generally speaking, if one merely just goes to refuge into the three jewels in itself does make one be a Buddhist practitioner, but then is it enough to just enter Buddha Dharma in this way? So it is probably not enough. So what should we actually do once we have entered the Buddha Dharma? Once we have entered the Buddha Dharma, we should also enter the path that the Buddha had taught, that the Buddha had shown us. And so our teacher, the Buddha, what is his special quality? So the Buddha in the past had accumulated merit throughout endless aeons, and he had purified his own obscurations. And as a result of that, he attained that which is to be attained, and that is the state of enlightenment. So he liberated himself completely from the suffering of the three states of samsaric existence and attained the state of enlightenment. And so this state of enlightenment is not something that only he could attain and nobody else can. But what the Buddha saw, what he knew, is that all sentient beings, limitless as space, have that very same potential. They all can attain this state of Buddhahood. They all possess the cause for attaining this state. And so knowing that with great love for these beings, the Buddha taught that if you also want to attain that state of awakening, there are generally many causes and conditions that need to be met. But the root cause is something that we all possess, and that is Buddha nature. You all possess Buddha nature. And the Buddha nature of a Buddha and the Buddha nature of a sentient being are exactly the same. There is no difference. It is not that one is better and the other one is worse. There is no division between them at all. And so this is what the Buddha had taught. And then what is it that we need to do in order to actualize this Buddha nature? We need to accumulate merit or the accumulation, we need to complete the accumulations of merit and the accumulation of wisdom. So we need to enter the Dharma. We need to engage in the practice of the path. And so for that sake, the Buddha taught the 84,000 different Dharma teachings.
Mansugi Jula, Dunghepa Tarwatang, Deva Tartubaji Tobar Chevade, Sanjigi Zode ke Mewa Imbare. Kesipena Sanjigi Ngamzula, Jinyangde, Imbatewana, Jinte Tuyuna, Sanjigi Tende Tegre, Kaisuna Teag Tuniji Chimbuyore. Yinaya Tea Mewa into Zanata, Sanjigi Karisungurusana, Nye Churanzurata, Tabegi Taptingins. The Indu. Dendro top telatene chura tarba top tugre vesana jaja top tugres yinaya ti top de susu mone dugure san sonyondo ta top de sanjege chure de indu zane tene nganzo jita chu dugure seyaji dugi samyaji de ji yongbe yorwa de indu zane ta jedang ge tene ji chu du sendu zane zawegi mangshi de karesna 대발에 근데 대바 대양 그냥 실업단 만들어야기 대박이 대점지 편도 용면도 되는 전에 실업단 대박이 대바지 구요로와 그 가래나 그 점생양 다와지 심배 토네 대바지 제토 송아이나 되는 뭐네지 땡보지 차도구요로와 대인도 전에 되는 건도 산재기 취라 동물 투바서야 이렇게 친구인 같은데 지 차인 거요로와 개세 되네지 다 투바 주는 마제바이는 투바추는 제구 매와 있는 산지기 추구 보면 제대로 송양을 그방만 차로 그래. 투바 제구면은 대난신 가랑 저 가주기 라마튼 저 앞에 송 담가 앞에 망보다 든 상모 송야 되는 차로 그러와. 대인도 전에 도말 투바 제구요다. 대냥 투섬 전에 되게 된데라 냠내 검직 매 바이나. 대냥 투섬 제구기 다직 반 레셰제지 하고 그러와. 마도베 문에기지 타르두기 또와디 문든 좀 못바인 바래 대체도 전에 근데 투섬게 땡도 곰바 세야데 네버도 고데 같은 시리도 어디인도 전에 단도는 되네 다부른 부채기 단단데 람초는 진행하는 데지 송바래 투섬 곰섬 풍머르 제바데 마늘와인스 마늘을 추추 세야지 송도 전에 퇴바당, 삼바당, 곰바숨보대 땅문에지 냠도 제야. 투섬곰 숨커지야. 투바지부자 마인바. 삼바지부자 마인바. 곰바지부자 마인바. 투섬곰숨 어당 안저배는 칼라지 대와 카세. 선웨지 세지 사야요와. 지로네 팔이 유den게 나로라 체엔담을 유den게 사야요와 땡도 꾼냠도 사고도 돼. 그런 사단도데 상황에서 냠도 도도시는 사고도 되는 신체네 퇴바다 삼바다 곰바 숨보데 되는지 냠도 지야다 마늘 같은 데지 인스는 숨바에 띠인도 전에 생각도 주의라지 당보 퇴삼의 돈에 시험벌지 시험백이 되니라 곰베 돈에 냠내나 대단히 제용도 전에 다 넘버 천이버지 차투거든 산제 코랑 람 간제 찍을 때는 패반한신 플로마텐 소양 남가 디데나야 로통켄지 차투그와 텐데 인도 전에 되는 거지 다 추라 원롱 티든데 슈가 짬 마인바 근데 슈베 된다고 돌아 소소게 삼로당 소소그 곰죠 텐데지 제거에도 백해 정보 인기사래 텐데 인도 다 드링 안 존데네 마 군치는 진 추라게 되니 지다 담가 자 정보 인담 어다 텐수 돌아 제 신년치에 되는 소소게 강토도 문두지하다 되게 값이 임바래
And so we call the Buddha I call the Buddha our teacher. We do not call him like a lecturer. So this is to say that he taught us that what he spoke, the Dharma that he spoke, is something that actually can separate ourselves. Through his teachings, we can separate ourselves entirely from suffering, and we can achieve the state of ultimate happiness. And so teaching is that he shows us how to do that. And so it is not that he is coming to give us a gift. So if the Buddha could gift us nirvana, just give it to us, then he would surely do it out of his great compassion for us. But he cannot just give us nirvana. So therefore the Buddha said that I can show you the path that leads to liberation, the method that leads to liberation. So if you apply this method that leads to liberation, then can you really become liberated? With 100% certainty, you can become liberated, but you have to practice the method yourself. And so this method is what we call the Buddha Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha. And so through that, the thought arises. By knowing that the thought arises, I have to practice the Dharma. So this inspiration to practice the Dharma arises. And so what is the root or the foundation of Dharma practice? It is to cultivate faith. But then faith that is not founded in wisdom is also not that beneficial. So faith needs to be imbued by wisdom, meaning that one needs to develop faith on the basis of understanding the reasons behind it. So for this reason, it is important that we first listen to the Buddha Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha. If we neglect that, if there would be no need to listen to the teachings, to learn the teachings, then the Buddha teaching, the 84,000 different Dharma teachings, would become meaningless. Then all the instructions, all the teachings given by, for example, the past Kagyu masters would all become pointless. But because they taught all these teachings, it shows that it is necessary that we hear these teachings, that we learn these teachings and reflect upon them. And then having heard the teachings, we also need to practice them. So we need to meditate upon them. It is not enough to simply hear the teachings. So first we must hear an explanation, but then in order to really actualize realization of these teachings, we also have to actually practice them. We have to meditate upon them. So one cannot be without the other. And so Gampopa had said in the Precious Garland of the Supreme Path that there is not a section called the 10 Unmistaken Dharmas. And in there it says that listening, reflection, and meditation have to be practiced together. So that is to say that it is not enough to just listen. It is not enough to just reflect. It is not enough to just meditate. These three of listening, reflection, and meditation have to be practiced together, all of them. For example, it's like when you're eating a sandwich. So on a sandwich, outside, you have the bread, and inside you have different fillings of the sandwich, all kinds of vegetables and so on. And so there's many different things in the sandwich, but you have to eat them all together. That's how you eat a sandwich. And so just like that, you have to practice listening, reflection, and meditation together. They all have to be practiced. And then that becomes an unmistaken Dharma practice. So in the beginning, when we start with the Dharma, we do have to understand it. So we have to hear and listen and reflect. And then on top of that, we have to meditate. We have to practice what we have heard. And if we do so, then we become a really authentic Buddhist practitioner. So and then we are actually able as disciples to truly practice the path that the Buddha has shown to us. So therefore, when we enter the Dharma, when we practice the Dharma, it is not enough to just receive empowerments and teachings and transmissions. Once we have received them, we also have to reflect on their meaning and practice them. That's very important. And so, and that is what we will continue with today in the 35 heartfelt advices by the omniscient Rinpoche Chökyi, and the very precious words of advice. And so these are, now I'm going to continue to explain to the best of my abilities the next word of advice.
밤에 창등 뇌로 라소바 담배 치신 수점 자료주 다도 바다 댐베 송섬지 뭐자제바 쿠인행담인 송도와 단디 계잔데 드네 자와다 안에다 드네게 계자야 말에 드네 드르웨 계자지 보양 말에 너나 드네 산지게 댐베 지수 슝네 다 잠루고 넘바 슈와네 종데 드네 카르고르스나 다 쪼고 남샤 준도 돈한 개체주 제야데 밤에 쥐어 같은 소라 배서서 제고래 정말 밤에 베나타네지다 젠담을 자야 나도 제몬담을 자야다 배샤 젠만 보자기도 나도 지제도 와라 지시는 유지래 근데 망체와데 지 룽바 쪼 같은 소라 망보 용도 근데 간담선도 소소기 침상한다 드네지다 정말 현로도 대인도산에 텐데게 밤에 제목이 텐데다 얘는 창기를 단 창대양 지단에는 노초기 절갑당한다 통소에는 망체와지 양 창등으로고 추유여바지 통도와 다 가시는 양 최면 통계인데 요래데 다 주 에시에 추원로지 가버도 자단 배유단 표현 히말라야를 주 통소에는 지금 창통용도 장 창통계 등록이 썸로 간대 장 통계로서는 지금 인지문지 라즈구이와 나신지 그래서 라즈 마투바이나 창통화되게 편도매와 나신지 지는 통계와 음식 조пол 편도 용야 지도 성당 말다 인지문지 라즈 되는 베투바 잽딱 생지라야 지도고 창 통계와 띠인도 전에 되는 문제지 다 창인데 근데 처음에 통용도 전에 소소고 조보 돌아야 차 난기 변주로 돌아야 차 되는 저속이 든들이야 돌아 차임으로 띠인도 창도 배지 도서 난고를 선거를 되는 창다 대나제는 로임 제알라 소바 어떤 돈나 지 지우 담바탄 쪽이 지금 지윤도 자는 거네 첼레장이야 트리용야게 내가 된소 당 소속에 되는 지금 추림 등소야 반 찬로야게 주든소 니버도 되는데 빵 뭐야 돼 개침불에스 어떤 데서 와 대인도 자네 다버도 간서 변한지 창체면 되게 요래 빼침불도 뽐부 첨부 텐데 창체만 통계이나야 다 무맥을 주는 통솔라 소션으로 그때 배나 벽이 잘못하는데 틀을 받친세로 앞에 깨다 첨부에 벽이 잘못 주제 레데 공남주 수직 라케요 말고 담아들 공 창만 붙여내 라즈네 텐데시네 되는 정성으로 주는 시에다와 텐데 창은 되는 정마도 백협상 배치 매용거였대 또 재미지 차용도 텐데레 다 텐소테데 드니 바지 방야당 두다도 바도 뎀베토네 당문에 같이 산지게 뎀베 지수슈 네드니 잠루고 domba 렘바이 네게니 그 domba 렘바이 라소바다 소소고 domba 카레 슈유나야 텐소 다 양타바지 숭이 선배 송섬 토네 가두이나야 뭐사유바지 지야 백해침부레스 뭐차와서 전에 안 된대지 쟤는 되게 말해 산지게 되는 진주글 로마지레 되는가 뭐차기레 300 도전데 니버도 고야 돼 땡행행담이스 어테레 다티 유데바 있는데 메데 지 시신 들어와 미야고이 자기르서래 어야
So then we continue now today with verse number 15. So this verse speaks about our normal conduct, day-to-day life, and what we need to be very careful about and be very mindful about. So it says, non-mindfulness, alcohol, sexual misconduct, and so forth are the objects of scorn by the noble ones. It is the cause of the violation of vows. Be mindful always with the intention of guarding the vows. Feel shameful to violate them. This is my heartfelt advice. So this advice is not just addressed to the ordained, the monks and the nuns. It is not speaking about from the perspective of just a Vinaya, but it's really addressing any follower of the Buddha, anyone who has basically taken the refuge vow. So anyone who follows the Buddha as a Buddhist practitioner in their day-to-day activities and whatever they do, should be very mindful. There are some things to be extremely mindful about. So there's all kinds of things that can distract one from wholesome activity. For example, through unmindfulness, for example, we engage in all sorts of like frivolous and meaningless activities, such as, for example, gambling. Maybe it is different in the Western countries, but especially in many of the poor countries in the world, often when people gamble, they gamble away everything that family has, and they lose everything they have. And basically that comes back to unmindfulness. Then also drinking of alcohol. So also in Western countries, probably maybe people drink alcohol more in moderation. So some maybe drink it with more moderation than others. But again, many Eastern countries, for example, in India or in Tibet, in the Himalayan regions, then the reason why people drink is because they want to get drunk. So if they drink, then they definitely want to be drunk, because if they don't get drunk, there's no point in drinking in the first place. So they drink until they get drunk, and then they start fighting with each other, and all kinds of trouble comes from that. And they're also destroying their bodies, their health, they're wasting away all their money, and so on. They start to fight with others, so they obviously don't get along with others. So what this verse is speaking of is that kind of conduct to be very careful about. And then also sexual misconduct and so forth. And so all of these are objects of scorn by the noble ones, by the holy beings. Because, for example, when we are intoxicated by alcohol, then naturally we will lose our wholesome conduct. It will become the cause of violating our vows. And that is why it is important to abandon such activities, especially intoxication, or like drinking alcohol leads to a lot of trouble and loss. For example, even someone in a very high position, like a minister and so on, there are many stories of how they completely were ruined just because of drinking alcohol. For example, in the past, there was this famous Tibetan king, Rinpoche. He was quite powerful and famous, and no one really could affect. No one could affect him, and no one could overcome him. But then the way he really brought himself down is, in the end, he basically was a drunkard, and he died from that. And then that really brought down his great powerful reign. So we can see that when we drink and we are intoxicated, it really has no good benefits. It only leads to faults. And that is why it should be abandoned. Ultimately, this verse speaks of being mindful, always be mindful, always with the intention of guarding the vows. So being mindful always means to remind yourself, thinking that I have enter the Buddha Dharma, I have taken vows, any vows. For example, I have taken the refuge vow, or I have taken the Pasaka vows, the layperson's vows, and so on. Therefore, I must hold these vows. So to have such a mindfulness of wishing to hold one's vows is important. And so for that, it says, feel shameful to violate them. So this shamefulness means that you think it's not okay for me to do this, to engage in such a frivolous activity, because I'm a follower of the Buddha Dharma. I have taken vows. I must be mindful. So to be peaceful and subdued in one's activity, that is the next hard advice.
Lega tu never do pangures. Te mabawina, ten jarbuchuran kale, medu til chundures. Ta kariture song in the song yoga. Jembunje dan dula tawa tang song, Jembunje wasna, Taji shodan, Zemola soba zen, Murshane, or Tende Zemozea, Chick. Tani Kadu in a pe, Mimambo, Zomdes, Temotaya pe, Gauche dea. Tare Jarbot and the pe, Mamman, Zomsala, Temotaya pe, Gauyon Kitchen, Ta Kadu in a Temotagan, Rodeva in a chicken soul in Hangua, Jarbolayate, Chick Subscription Tegurua. Around so penachi Temotavata deva in a take salt and Yanka Yuji Maritene, Yena Soso Penjula and Yanka Yurua, that Soso Lega Chiguet and the Maje, Chunyam Chiguet and the Maje, Flobjon Chinkin, Flobjon Maje, that Kadu in a Temochan, that Devina, the Soso Messimu Samalan Rua, or Tende in the Zane, Nivate, Mimampundusa, Temotaya, Shiragaya Yumares, Chia Yumares. Then is Sumba de la Lelushita Chia Yumares. Penachi, Jitengi Chawanda, Mendelpam Gonkone, or Tendesian, Yanachi, Nijan Kun, Niedeando, Tendegi Lelogi Shaman to Chursuayina, then Jerbuchurang Legamambuchi, Hardures. Tangaran Sondrojina Tenderoa, Penalojon Ching, Lotuji, Nayata, Lelochi, Nijanyaku Devayina, Colojon de Yakundumawa, Sombachi Naya, Sonam Dumawa, or today in the Zane, Lelopango is Sumbatilla. And he was the la Tobung in the Shiran Mares, the Shirama ten Mares. Tobung in Basset pe Nora Savore, Kains and Haranzo Sosuchi Urva, Sosuchi in Duzan and Anson Jura Tepsho. Tin du Penna Candere son in the Zan and Samson Sanga with you to the Sondova. Nyashat and the Shat and the Yata Nyagshain and the Shakarena, Shat and the Nimbachi. Zabe, Zangma, Xing Zangma, and then you do Yaja Waina. Nyima Kashila, Xing Zangma dan, Zangma to some of the Zoboso Sares. Betina Gento, Debate to put Nyam do Devaina, Nyima Kashin, Machantula Chandore, Sonore, or Tende in the Zane, Tene, Jivatela, Debate to Punyam do Yomares. Tene, Nabate Kasna, Chang Semeva Toyate. Nabate, Tajikon, Suman, Changtans. Then it Labordo Senaguna Kanjuman Chamdeate. Tubade, that Senabe, Dram Cham, that Desinea, Brodea Jingurua, or the Tenzutede, Muneji, Geda Yabumaimba, or Tendegisilla, Jayaki and Kaimure, somewhere Labordo Benajin, Sen Rodeate, Mang Chawat, Sen Rock Mang Chawat, Lega Yabuchigan room and Lega Duachania, Contro de Androji, Neta Chaimurua, or Tea in the Sane, Jabuchuranda, Tensugu Tola, Tene, Tatonangures, and all Tenesundua, Tatina Jet and the Nequinchins in Chudakian, that Tensutani Bangures, a Teson, thinking the means only.
And then Nagarjuna said in a letter to a friend, which was a letter to his friend, the king. So he gave advice to the king, and he said to the king, you are very famous and your activity is excellent. But there are 6 activities that you surely have to be very mindful about and abandon in your daily activities, in your conduct. Because if you're not mindful of these, then slowly you will, degrade or degenerate, not get onto the wrong track. So now he lists those 6 activities to abandon. So the first activity to abandon is the gambling, such as playing with some dice or any other gambles, and betting one's money for various games. Then the second activity to abandon is to mix with many people for the sake of like watching or kind of enjoying entertainments, various spectacles. So that is something that when you engage in this, then your mind becomes distracted. And so then you always want to be distracted by these entertainments and watch these spectacles. And for a king, so when the king mixes with a lot of people for the sake of entertainment, there's also a danger of assassination, that he might be killed. And so that's why you should be careful. Of course, in our case, this is not particularly a danger. We are likely not being assassinated when we mix with many people. But in our case, it means that we lose all of our money, and we also actually miss doing other important things, our other activities like practicing the Dharma, or if you're a student, to study. So basically, we neglect the actual important activities and just waste our life in frivolous entertainments. So therefore, one should not, he gave this advice to the king, don't mix too much with other people for the sake of entertainment. So that's the second advice. The third advice is do not be lazy, give up laziness. When we are lazy, we become carried away by all kinds of mundane activities or sleeping and so on. And then when the king is lazy, that he will miss out on many of the important activities that a king should do. And so also in our case, for example, if one should study, but instead of studying, one is lazy and one just sleeps and doesn't do anything, then obviously study is not going to turn out well, will it? Or for example, if you are a business person and you don't do anything, then obviously your business won't go so well. So therefore, he said, abandon laziness. Then number 4, he said, do not associate or rely and follow negative companions, because that always leads to trouble. And that is all because we are ordinary people. And as ordinary people, we are certainly susceptible for influence. So we can change, something can change us. For example, in the secret mantra in the Vajrayana and a Tantra, it says, it is like when you have some rotting fish flesh or any kind of other flesh and kind of other meat, and you put it on together with a clean piece of wood, and then you leave it there for some days. Then as the flesh, the meat is rotting, it also will defile the wood that it is placed on. So then the wood also will begin to smell like the rotting fish flesh. So similarly, if you associate with a negative companion, it will influence us in a negative way and make our mind become spoiled. So this is number 4. And then number 5, as we mentioned before, is do not engage in heedless or immoderate drinking of alcohol. And then number 6 is the last one, is don't wander around, roam around at night time. So if you really think about it, anybody who goes around at night time is probably up to no good. Probably is not up to do some great activities. Most things that people do when they roam around at night are probably are not so good activities. So therefore, there's a danger that when you roam around at night, that you associate with negative companions and engage in all kinds of unwholesome activity. So therefore, he advised the king, do not roam around at night. And so very similar to these 6 advices by Nagarjuna, also the omniscient Rinpoche Trikitagpa gave this hard advice on what one needs to be mindful of or abandon in one's conduct.
Ashologa jonga pa nindam jonga judu pa de kar sumdusna chonju luji roje chinye pa kamlu nuji jintil mawe ju 다도 좀좀 더는 내라서 르지 봐요 그 인담이 스탄데네 마 르게 봐요 제고레스 나게 봐요 바 제고레스 sem 봐요 바 제고레스 다티 숨데 마 소용도 담보 르드레 당안조 지단한테네 지 르게 르제라이데 개체모도와 르제데 고레 조군 트레된 고요로와 다 이나양 양 체매백인 총죽 제야당 르게 양지 체지매 같은 데서 제와 있나 yang 되게 감당 누그레스 지용천에 다 지금 총배 삼성강조 양 메텐데 내용으로 다 코페 슈침보 여러다 코페 총투로 다 쓰잖아요 양 배슈침보 총들에 지는데 양 소소소 강바 차야당 라소 같은 내용으로 대시되잖아 다 텐데인도 총야당 주야당 졸아양 제시교 같이 지고레스 텐데 체매 같이 르게 되네 죄받은 졸아양 체레 가르소마이나 메텐조게 틀리하게 주차그레스. 왜냐면 아주 맥이 틀어왔을 때는 엔데로와 틀어서야 틀라 뜨바 주위반 나진진 틀려지 용그래. 다 코페 야포여다 코페 수부 되고여다 코페 항상 총투고다 코 한번 도장만 보는 총투고다세 라위여 뜨바 주와 나진 라위르데 문에게 돈에 즉 틀외게 찍으러 될 틀식식으로 디나진 인도잖아요. 드네 지금 류게 배 제바 밤에만 뭐 제바이나 미션 다게 되네 틀외게 주차그레스 다 텐데 인도잖아요. 뒤따도 좀좀 들어내요. 좀좀 생각지 류게 배 시즌 들어왔지네. 류게 제바 참아지 오르차고 많이 봐. 텐데 제바 돈도 배 증보 많이 봐. 제바 잠보 제바 들어 내봐라 그런 것도 합고레스 텐데 단 돌초 되어 있는 류게 돈에 봐요지야티 그냥 행동이 송거다.
So then move on to verse number 16. It says, frivolous games of jumping and running are injurious to the body. It is the cause of scorn by others. Be humble always and emphasize training one's mind and be mindful of the body. And this is my heartfelt advice. Then in the next verses, he discusses the mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of the speech, then mindfulness of the mind. And so it begins with the body. Generally speaking, our body is very important to us. And of course, speaking of games of jumping and running and so on. So generally speaking, exercise is very is good for our body. It's healthy, but then also here we need to have some of moderation and care, and not carelessly engage in physical activities of such as jumping and running around, as it can become injurious. Actually, it can harm one's elements and one's body, one's constitution, and so, for example, sometimes somebody may think that, this one person can jump so high, he's so strong, and then then you also jump as high and you run, but then you might break your legs when you try to do that. So in terms of our jumping and running, our physical activity, we also need to apply some moderation, because if we are really indiscriminate about our activity and just overdo it, then actually, even though we may think that it will lead to becoming praised or kind of looking good, if I can jump so high, actually it becomes a cause of scorn by others. So we think that it leads to praise, and no, people will think that, oh, he's so strong and he can jump so high, he can jump like a few floors of like the height of a few floors in a building and so on. But actually, it is ultimately a cause of scorn by others. Therefore, one should be humble and train one's mind. And because if one becomes too unmindful and overdoes one's activities, then it is no longer a cause of praise by others. So instead, what we should do in terms of our physical conduct should be humble and subdued and not pretentious. Also should not be like harsh or forceful, but we should train our body in very gentle and subdued activity and behavior. So that is the heartfelt advice in terms of one's physical conduct.
르기 쮸바 데베 시신 들어와이나 텔라테네 지 소소기 미르 야보양 줍트야드네 펜도 용그레스 베나타단스 쯔즈든 시미든 솔라 시미기 쯔즈든도 심베 갑라 담보베 르기 쮸바데 시신 들어와지는 내기도 왔어 지 우양 배치 당기와 하마고나 신신은 그 내기도 왔어 근데 내내 뜻을 섬투도 왔어. 대마도 담보는 르기 쮸바데 배증본으로 제대로 있는 뜻성을 되는 대인도 전에 오늘 르기 쮸바지 시신 들어와요나 대라더니 캡상마도 종요 말했어. 어떤 정도와 대시도 전에 되니 지금 아주 산재기 진주 남기 르기 쮸바데 배 시와책으로 송도와 시와래. 배나 칸데 고르스나 냐스임경기 추자난신기 쮸바고 그랬어. 这是神经的心门安心就把过是被就把讲不就把希望的这个来是我的送的话但是我那时候本来今天同的送的当然那样切当心美但是神经里头说六个就把的看的也会有吧太长期你把忙个啥的话大部分强中压个这个话也是跟着六个就把他们的切定个钱呢但是大部分老板呢你打啥个话대난 시변은 부충충다 지네 공연바 망하라기도 르기 제바 야고요나 다 섬근나 삼로 간데 요면은 가서 지기지를 하고 말와 대인도 당분간 좀 매직 투용을 가서 르기 제베 돈 투용을 마도 섬기 제바 가서 통투 말와 대인도 전에 근데 르주테 야고요고에 개체물에 숨겨서네
And Shantideva said in the Bodhicharya Avatara that if your physical conduct, the conduct of your body is very peaceful and subdued, then that will be helpful for accomplishing your various goals, your ambitions. And so if you really look at it, for example, it is like when a cat tries to catch a mouse. So the cat is stalking the mouse very gently from behind, so the mouse doesn't even know a cat's there, and then all of a sudden the cat catches the mouse because the cat is very quiet and very peaceful and stalks silently from behind. On the other hand, if the cat wouldn't do that, if the cat would just make all kinds of noise, then probably all the mice will just run away and the cat wouldn't catch one mouse. So similarly, as followers of the Buddha, our physical activity, our conduct must be peaceful and subdued in such a way. So our conduct should be as focused and subdued as a fisherman trying to catch a fish, or like a cat trying to catch a mouse. So, for example, also when we look in a worldly sense, the various animals like our pets, like cats and dogs, for example. When the pet behaves well, then it's much more likely to get a treat, a little gift from the owner and be treated well. If not, if they act out, then definitely very unlikely for them to get a treat. Or also even a little child, if a child behaves well, then it's very likely to get a treat. And so that's why our physical conduct is important, because that's the first thing that we see in somebody else. We can't really know what they're really thinking in their minds. When you first meet somebody, when you meet a person, you're really seeing what they're doing, the activities. You don't really know what they're thinking in their mind. And so that's the first impression we get. And therefore, our physical conduct is very important.
Atene Nyima nga gitne da payu cheatre jubden bade. Nga gi longtam shadan kureso charbun sobe uso nyamgawa. Sheden trishin nipa kunjiji nalsik durwa kubu hindami songdowa. Tati songdu zane da nga gi juba teyang, juba pe yidongwa, juba shiwa, juba njamba, juba demba, teneji gures. Temato tene kagenana da gejape kanjong manjong ndamanda chana she. Tene 참참 zemo yinba nangshin, 참참 ngune yinba nangshin, mangbuji she dewa yina, ta tende geja she yade, churang nangshin mepe chupo, tende jimala jibu yung res, ta tsama geja kanjong manjo she dewa me sama samba jibu no cha si res. Yina ngune min namchu yung kendang, mi yaku tansu gundeng churang ngune ki mi marab chigitane changro res, geja kanjong manjo she dewa tegi, tiche yung zane, tene 가두이나 나게 측대 배 들어지야 돼. 인담이 정말 나측 시신자 가지고 그래서 대송을.
The next second is the mindfulness of the speech. That's verse number 17. Gossip, jest, joking, and promiscuity, which delight people, is the object of embarrassment by wise ones. These are the root of all faults. Be humble with speech. This is my heartfelt advice. So regarding our conduct of the speech, it is that our speech should be pleasant and peaceful and gentle and truthful. And not just saying all kinds of things all the time, sometimes playing around, sometimes speaking for real, saying all kinds of things. So it's possible, of course, if we joke around like that, that some people might laugh about it and they might feel good about it, happy about it. But really, from the perspective of someone who actually is very intelligent, it actually is more of a rude behavior to speak in this way. And so therefore, it is his hard advice to be very mindful of the words you speak. And the words one speaks should be peaceful and subdued.
Tindu zane chidang nzo penaji zemo chene geja shea chi ngurwa. Tindu di chije gi jiso nangla shida shuchi mumundu ade. Ta pepe jiso nangla tepe mangbo yorde. Ji ngune zemo yinba la, ya ji di ngune yinba nangshin chene geja shea chi ngurwa. Samsam tela tena tene kale zemo de dur dundo ne tene chupe kan le ngurwa. Techidu zane tene ya tenso yang ta ji zo geja tela chejimebe 좀 생각되는 연구요와 담보 배제만 하신 지는 게자시 지기지랑 저올라 제몬라 근데 게모셔 근데 디스 제인도 측비야 슈체레 체르 차인도 근데 공로데사 근데 슈체레 체르 차인도 전 두바션도야 근데 용도와 디인도 전에다 전소체데 지 나기 니발한테 중요해 같은데 지로와 디인도 근데 지 게자시 시에바이나야 된다 덴바 칭장바 칭님바 어떤데지 근데 게자 시에는 체지요 같이 제고래 제가 대조고 송거래 된도 체매베 게자 된소거더니 녀라 체매와 조용거와 된도 그베게 되는 담배지거래 이렇게 되서라 자선도 다보야고 자고래스 간인사는 자선도 치료를 시작해 와있는 차바기 런바차 초라 찬으로 근데 근케게 되서라 자마든도 다보야고 자고래스 자든도 가서는 별 사실 정말 인도잖아요. 야, 참참 차바 초게 되는 킹네. 참여해 되는 용도로. 다 열가든 군가 체버면 말 카드다고 여고 잡으래 세계. 열가에 당 군가게 체버면 봐. 뒤따도 카드다고 여고 잡으래 소소 카드. 마도베 카드는 괜찮다면 망보시. 되네 될 때네 도보 펜션 주야. 제촌 주야. 제감 주야. 어떤데기 되는 여러 망보지 카드는 용도요. 티치드산에 카다보야 잡으래 생각인데 세도와 티나신 치드산 타나데네양 빠테든 tum바지 송괴래 텐도 나츠 들어 쿠인다미 인사 테레 다 튼다 튼도 인사래.
So when regarding joking around, so maybe in the also in the Western countries it's not a really a big issue, but in the Tibetan society that actually happens quite a lot. So it's kind of like there's people joke around, and so it's a joke, but there's also some a little bit of truth in that joke, and so then sometimes it begins with people are laughing about it, it's just a joke, but then no, there's some truth to it, and then it just like it kind of gets out of hand, and then people end up fighting because of that. Because they have no measure to their words. They just keep talking and talking, and then eventually what was funny in the beginning is no longer funny. And so first it starts out with laughing, and then they don't stop, and then the words get a bit stronger, and then people start to get a little bit angry, and then they keep talking and talking, and then in the end they end up fighting. And then that is how we accumulate negativity with our speech. So therefore it's important to, when we speak, to speak just what is meaningful, and to speak the truth, and to really just say what is essential in terms of like how much we speak. So there should be some kind of moderation in not heedlessly and endless talking. So it is that it really is through endless talking that we create endless problems. There's this saying that we have in Tibet that in summertime you have to take good care of your like iron, the kind of vessel, iron pot, because when you put it out, it rains a lot, and then it gets wet and starts to to how do you call it, like oxidize, right? And then in wintertime, you have to take care of your clay pot, because in wintertime it gets very cold, and when the water freezes, it could crack. And so that one thing that you have to take care of both summer and winter is your mouth. So which means don't talk too much, because if you talk too much heedlessly, it ends up in a disharmony and conflict with your friends. And that's also why that there's conflict in different communities or different countries in the world. A lot of trouble really comes from too much talking and heedless talking. So therefore the advice is guard your mouth. Don't say too much, and what you say should be meaningful.
야, 다 좁제 받에 가서도 다 쪼고 셈제. 룡아 도리야 랑섬 마도나 제대로 둘다 칠레 남들신 간잠 뜻줍 녀몽 콩도 쏘 랑섬도 그분 힘담이스. 다 당보 르데 누구 르시와 고레 송송 니와 나데 시와 고레 송송 다야 르다 나니베 시신 들어와 르베 야보 시신 들어와 나 잠보 근데지 여바이나양 야 섬긴나라 지 옌라 뇌섬당 어다 대나신도 옌라 차도당 옌라 전성기 로베 녀몽슈 차보지 여바이나 야 대팽마레스 베나테네 르다가 두르섬데 두르마토바이나 르나시 차그레스 르데 파다드다네 콜라자 무세 닌카 요나시문도 라과는 콜문도 강바는 콜문도 나무는 프로야는 콜문도 이나양 섬게나가 셰당다 독슈 첨부 요즘 전관에 참아 셴로요로 Tena Shindo Tene Chilas Dusanida, Shimirwa, Shimitenzuko, Lu Shijin Tua Yurite, Seminane, Zizilape, Controsane, Tela Tenechi, Sego Sambe, Sosam Shuta without Tenechi was Tindu, Yang, Lu Dur, Sam Madurayina, Munetanzonajin Chandra and Yankayumres. Tende Induzane, Tene, Kan Jambu Che, Samgit Ding de Be, Zubu Che. Nyomba tsama kobena ya bene ji pena torchocho che devaina te yago yomares tindu boduru mo songje na yowa tonta nyime chusi chubezus kala shimbo ra nyima jibo shar tende yoga chuba na jinje be shishin tuba kulholo yorwa kange ke yomare 아직 쟁 맞은 태연도 전에 두고 대한 때 또. 뭐야 남시 대한 장모 차. 근데지 메신다게 때에서 년도 거든데 진짜 남상 공조 사초촌도 차 소원이나 대주 바양 더 말해스. 어떤 정도가 대인도 전에다 조고 가서나 섬든 노래야 돼. 당연히 힘다 뭐마대 송바랑 섬도 그 힘담이.
And so then next is verse number 18, and that is the mind. The mind is most important. It says, when one's mind is not disciplined, but the body and speech are trained, it is similar to the tail of the snake and cat. One collects discursive thoughts with manipulative speech and a bad attitude. Tame one's mind. This is my heartfelt advice. So first, our body has to be disciplined or subdued. Then second, our speech has to be disciplined. But then, if only our body is disciplined and our speech is gentle and disciplined, and the mind is undisciplined, that's also of no benefit, because even if your physical conduct is excellent and your speech is very gentle, in your mind, if you hold thoughts of wishing to harm others, or jealous thoughts, or competitive thoughts, or any other really strong afflictive emotion, then of course the excellent physical and verbal conduct are also not of so much benefit. So then in that case, if one's mind is untamed, even though one's body and speech seem disciplined, one becomes, as is danger, one becomes just like a snake or a cat that we mentioned before. So for example, if you look at a snake, actually a snake doesn't have any hands, it doesn't have legs, and it can't fly, but still we are afraid of it because the snake has is said to have hatred or anger and is very poisonous. So that's why we are still afraid of the snake. Or, for example, a cat might be very peaceful or subdued in their activity, their physical movement, but they are very angry at the mouse, and they just want to kill it in their mind. So even though you can see it, even though the body might be disciplined, if the mind is not disciplined, then there's a danger that we become just like that snake or that cat. So that happens when we, for example, we speak very gently, verbally, when we speak to others, but at the same time, even though we might speak very nice to others, deep in our mind, we might be actually very harsh. We might hide all kinds of afflictions inside of ourselves. And so that there's one collects these discursive thoughts within one's mind, and then one really manipulates with speech and has a bad attitude inside. So Pato Rinpoche also said that when everything goes well, when you have a full belly, the sun is shining, you're basking in the sun, then you may appear as a true Dharma practitioner, a peaceful and subdued, all is good. There's no problem. But the moment a negative circumstance arises, it's like when the weather gets cold or you're starting to get hungry, somebody else comes and just teases you a little bit or insults you, then immediately you are just ready to get angry at whatever negative thing arises. That actually is a sign that you are not a true Dhamma practitioner. So that relates to this heartfelt advice. Since the mind is most important, this is really the actual heartfelt advice.
Then Lovan Ludugian, sitting in the Karasumbaras Nam, Naranzo Milla, Yewa Yure, Sondo, Chidan. Kandayures and Mekashi, the Medan Shinto Amni the Peshare, Mango, Amni the Peshane, Shinto ge Am the Kasheji, Chilon and Tawa in a Serbochane, a Pechi Mindeva Nanshin, Chilo Serboimba, Shinto Mimba Nanshin. Yinayang Nang Min Matupa, Tendegi Shinto Yores, Chip Minla, Mam Nang Mamimba. Ya Shinto Am Kashi. Tene chilo de mamimba nanshin mumbo yimbala nanglo yang sachocho chane minde batende yores. Tene shingdo am kashe de cheyang mumbo yimba mamimba nayang sam mrongwa mamimba tende yores. Tene shingdo am kashe de cheyang mimba serbo yimba nayang sachocho chane minde batende yores. Yewa yin petina shindu ngaranzo mindawo jina Mekashi, Chilogi, Jubape, Yabu Yuvala, and Nangi Sempe Dujayanki. Some of Maron Tanke, and the Ures. Tenea Mekashi de Nangi Samlupe, Yabu Yubainaya, Chilogi, Jubate, Zubuyanki, and the Ures. Tenekashi, Chinanigape, Dubuyanki. Or Kashi, the Chinaniga, Be Zambuyinki, and Regi Yawashi Ures, Tichiduzan, and Nanzo Kariburesana, Yapsho Cheyang Shishing Durwa, Nayang Shishing Durwa, Chinanika, Yahuimbate, Chayan Beson Chigures. Madobe, Chinanika Mamhimbate, Chaya Yomares. Tambungarang so Chedana Nika, Yabu Menkin de Inayang, Tenekale, Kalinjuatan, Tambu Chene, and Juatane, Che Yabucha. Tenekale, Kalena Yabucha to one Beson Zogures. O Tenesondo, Tin the Tana, Renzin Chudaki and that Tenajin in the Sungur, Tene, Tanji Tambo, Lu Yabu, the Sonsa, Lu Payu, Tening Ayabu, the Sonsa, that another Zo, Sandrores, a Tesondoa, or Tin the Tane, then Tendeton that you don't jiba inside.
And again, Nagarjuna said in the letter to a friend that there's 4 kinds of people. So for these 4 kinds of people are similar to a mango fruit. So there's 4 kinds of mango fruits in terms of their ripening process. So the first one is the outside of the mango is yellow, or it looks like it's ripe, but the inside is unripe, so you can't really eat it. So the outside is ripe, the inside is unripe. And the second kind of mango is kind of unripe, kind of green on the outside, but inside it's ripe, so you can actually eat it. And then the third kind of mango is unripe on the outside and also unripe on the inside, where you still can't eat it. And then the fourth kind of mango is ripe or yellow on the outside and also ripe on the inside. You can eat it. So just like that, there are 4 kinds of individuals, of people. So there are some people whose outer conduct is excellent, but whose inner mind is not so good, has a bad state of mind, have all kinds of negative thoughts. Then there's some people who on the inside really have good thoughts, but then outside their behavior is a little rough. And then there's another kind of person who they're bad on the outside and on the inside. And then the fourth kind is they're good on the outside and the inside. So which one of these four should we adopt? Ideally, we should be disciplined and subdued on the outside, and also disciplined and subdued on the inside. So we should make an effort in goodness outside and in. And definitely not be unripe and bad outside and in. So in order for that to happen, therefore, first we change our outside, our physical behavior. That's why first the mindfulness of the body is being mentioned. So first we make an effort in disciplining our body and then our speech. And then in this way, and through this process slowly, then also our mind becomes transformed into a peaceful and a disciplined mind. So that is why the omniscient Rinpoche Chökyi said first you need to have excellent physical conduct, then be mindful in your conduct of the speech, but most importantly, you have to tame your own mind.
차자 첨부기 냠내 칭켄직 응원에 다 차자 첨부기 냠내 지술고를 소용을 들어와 당가랑 저 당부 공연된 나신 전에지 검자도야 갈래카고로와 다이는 운에 차자 첨부기 된 검켄직이나 딱 검술 된대직래 스타트죠 인담 차친 검당의 돈들은 인담 소용을 대인도 전에 심리 초당 남도 용매래 전신 주배 농게 대주배 발라 마지 돈에 두개신 재미 라바 구인담인스 너 자자 친구기 검 텐데지 잠켄지기 돈에 소속의 심금 모을었다네 검 잠켄지기 돈에 선호 당와이나 네 넘도긴 짐반담을 매와지야 돼 답배 개체슈레스 야보던 두부 강긴 짐바 매와 짐바대 바지 조르토야 텐데지지야 땅에 행담인스 가르치네에서는 나랑 쪽에 심리 대해서 심리에서 심금하고 들어와 심금하고 배 초점만 하신래 제대 있느냐 나랑 쪽에 아직 심는 남도 안다만 뭐 지기로 되게 되네 심게 뭐데 용화선으로 림도 되네 대마세 땅가서 넘지 텐신 담으로 여러 담으로 탱게리 다지기 남 직성다 뭔가 거네 야본 참참 감가를 some 야보양 코레 참참 감 some nem바양 코레 티인도잖아 잔행게 남도 나 저거 되게 롱분나신레스 아주 섬디 뚜루당되게 요레스 다 텐데 인도잖아 지금 아주 검자기 찾아 전부 공부요서는 남도 어떤 거파 매와 소야게 체도 다양 남도 현다지 제주 대와이나 펜토요 말레스 남도는 투바자 마주스 카인팽 말레스 벤나 두긴 나살라 양절 두사대와이나 두긴 나살라 자그 말와스고 두긴 나살라 두기 양절 누그르와스 고슈 체르체르 창으로와스 베티나진도 먼저 자신 공부 가서 남도 파 빵야게 제도야 남도 젠다지 제주 대와이나 펜도 칸야 요 말레스 디인도산에 짐바 칸야 메버토 냠버샤야데 당연 행담 개체슈디 송바다
And so then, no, the next verse speaks about how to practice properly Mahamudra, now from the perspective of somebody who actually practices Mahamudra. So of course, in the beginning, to practice just like that is of course a little bit difficult, but now this is from a perspective of somebody who is actually practicing the true meaning of Mahamudra, and they should practice in this way. And so there's a heartfelt advice on how to genuinely practice Mahamudra. And that is verse number 19. One's nature of mind is like water tainted by mud. Shaking it by the wind of mindful awareness without effort, the illness will be cured of the poison itself. Practice without grasping. This is my heartfelt advice. So when we practice Mahamudra, we look at the nature of the mind. And when we look at the nature of the mind, what is in this context, it is most important that we do not develop all kinds of thoughts and fixations in our mind. whether it is good thoughts or negative thoughts. There should be no grasping in our mind at all. So the hard advice is to free yourself from all grasping in the mind in the practice of Mahamudra. Because at that time, you are looking at mind itself, the essence of the mind. And the essence of the mind is like pure water, but it becomes polluted by our thinking, because we always think about all kinds of things, don't we? And these things that we constantly think about obscure the nature of our mind, or they taint the nature of our mind. And so we sit there and we always have all kinds of thoughts. This chain of thoughts constantly arises in our mind. Sometimes there are good thoughts, sometimes there are bad thoughts, but all kinds of thoughts arise. And so these thoughts are like this wind that steer our mind and make it become muddy or kind of unclear. So we practice, in the practice of Mahamudra, when we meditate Mahamudra, the point is to become free of all thinking altogether. So if we practice, like develop one thought instead of another thought, then that, of course, is of no benefit in getting rid of thinking in general, right? So it's just like the instruction is don't fight a thought with a thought. It's will be of no benefit. For example, if you have a poison, if you ate poison, you get sick, then if you eat even more poison on top of that, you won't get better, will you? It will actually get worse. So similarly, now when you practice Mahamudra, give up all thinking. Don't apply more thoughts to one thought against another kind of thought. That will really not be very helpful. In Mahamudra, we have to be free of all mental grasping all together. So that is the most important hard advice when it comes to meditating in the state of Mahamudra.
Tene nishupe kapsu kharsu kondusana samda samjung puyuda tuwajin jigle jigjung teme temenjung techer rangrang o tongbala nyembu megu kuwin hindam yins. Tak munegi chachen ge tawe tone samlongshi tangyong zane tene anzo samda samjung sene yungurwa samjung seyad zo namdo chodondore ne samseyad namdo yung segi tene jida samgi ngo derido yurwa namdo minjung hongdaw de benen jeju mele tene samde jaso nanshin pe jana yure samjung de balam nanshin pe jana dawa te zane samjung balam bena ngazo chuge balam raw de yongsa de jaso nang suru yung yore pa timsa de jaso koran na pa tim la ro jaso balam de 중요한 장소 코라나 줄총 태면 장소 코라나 바 팀로레스 팀디 장소레 타테베기 발랍징 말레스 베티나 젠도 섬다 섬종세야 돼야 고 찍라 찍총 찍레 찍총 섬데 매바이나 섬종 남도도 중에 요거 말와 근데 인도산에 섬다 섬종이가 대라는 거 뭐더네 동바레스 디지도산에 디 임발라 임반인도 셴에 대가 랑게 돌았더니 냠바라 샤샤바이나 릭사와레스 대마도 다 남도 방향이 님보신다지 된 거야 개요 말레스 고 셴바 점지고네 딘릭 송아레스 다 딘디 조고 가서나지 전시게 제스면 토네 드네스는 뭐라 내 송아이나 대가 랑게 되는 남도랑 신경 간로레 송도와 대마도 남도 세트베 독자지 임바선다 다 대파 매와 송경이 님보지 고운도 삼네더니 탑시 제대바이나 드네 자자친구 또 가지고 지금 말해 송거래 대행된 간저 델로베게 드니 강감한 송여와 로이 취지 논대 되면통 재배 주기 참여 삶을 송여와 다직 난 님보지고 운도 다 방잔데 방야라 님본데 지고 운도 선택상 로이 취래 남도 우주에 취 대기 논대 자자치 못하는 통통 말에 송여와 근데 차제 첨부서야 돼 매절 매바당 쫄와 탐제당 잘와지래 된대게 매바당 쫄와 탐제당 잘와대 매술라 때는 더 말해스 된두 제배 주게 잘매 삶을 송거와 제바 수도자는 매절게 전번에 제자부에게 주직이 매절 매외게 살을 lep두 말해스 어떤 송문도와 대인도사는 쪼고가서다 지금 섬근 내로 뭐신 살외게 값수 근데 대가 랑게 돌아 템바 준 마체바지기 돈 네트 송아이나 근데 대가라는 검차로 마도베 다지 방잔된데지 님본된데지 선에 ndaman다 제대바이나 드리고 말해스 대송마다 님본는 그 구분행담이 소냐
The next verse number 20. Mind and mental factors are like incense and its smoke. One arises from another. Without one, another cannot arise. Each individual is self-void. No antidote is needed. This is my heartfelt advice. From the perspective of the view of Mahamudra now we speak about the mind and the mental factors. The mental factors are the various thoughts arising in the mind. And then mind here refers to the nature of the mind, which is the source, the origin out of which all these thoughts arise. Elaboration has said that the mind is like an ocean and the mental factors are like the waves on the ocean. When waves arise in the ocean, they arise out of the ocean. And when they subside, they dissolve back into the ocean. So therefore, the ocean and the wave are not separate. And so similarly, the mind and the mental factors arise interdependently. So the factors arise out of the mind. In other words, if there is no mind, if there were no mind, then there would also not be any mental factors, any thoughts arising. So the mind and the mental factors are, in essence, both empty. And it is enough to just rest in a meditative state that knows that. And it is not necessary to seek, so no antidote is needed, to seek some kind of other antidote or some way to get rid of those thoughts. Nothing else is needed, but just staying in that state with mindfulness, upholding mindfulness. And so that itself will naturally rid itself of all thoughts. It will stop the arising of the thoughts. So one should not think that I don't want to have those bad thoughts. I need to somehow get rid of them. I need to find an antidote against these thoughts. If we think in this way, if we try to get rid of our thoughts, then it is that we will actually not actualize or realize the state of Mahamudra. Tilopa had said in the Khenchen Mahamudra that that which transcends the intellect cannot be seen by means of the intellect. That which transcends activity cannot be achieved through deliberate activity. So in terms of the intellect, so when we think that there's something that I need to be abandoned, I need to find an antidote to these thoughts, that is the intellect. And the intellect, through the intellect, one cannot see the Mahamudra, that which lies behind or beyond the intellect. And so similarly, Mahamudra is an effortless state. And so therefore, an effortless state cannot be attained by means of deliberate action, by means of deliberate effort. Therefore, once we have understood this point, all that need to be done is to sustain continuous mindfulness of the natural state of mind. So with mindfulness, one maintains awareness of the natural state of the mind, and then that itself that is meditation. As long as one tries to find all kinds of antidotes and tries to avoid or get rid of one's thoughts and so on, one will not come to this actual meditative state. So that is the next heart advice.
Londe Khenchen Zemi Yingmengang Shadru Tunyam Ku Nyam Yin Songdawa. Tatechi to San Chidan Denema Tanda Tawate Zo Songdewa. Tanji Gangi Hindam Jurgu Padang, the Nishu Padang, Nishu Zaji Padang, Nishu Zaniba, the Jibutenzu Tawa Sonde, Taweg Motu. In Ti Watanama, Gombe, Johnsu Shia de Doa Sun Sun. In that tower, more trained to Tanji Kong to Tambo, Zemira Labore, Sonson, Tambo. Niba de, Nibo Goya Yumare, Sonson, that in the Sumba de, Tane, more Shannon degrees, Shadru Tunyam Cha, do not in Dixaris Tower. That is on. The Indusane Maranzo, that is Sem, Sayandi. Koranki Mology Sanotamina, yet Dumane. 산지기 모두 나나한다 만하나한다 산진지 된 감수 전한다 마전한다 나랑 속에 섬이란 신데 그 주바텀에다 잡아지 제대로다 주바다 잡아레스 이 인디산에 텐데게 섬고 대도는 삼노지 땅 소원이나 대배 주바다 집에고는 남도한다 만나간서 이자기 망부시라고 해요 말레스 남도 텐지 접종 마음에스 가서나 섬게 내루 주바탐제다 잡아듯이 또 툭송아이나 대랑게 토라 내야 마도베 대또서는 다 다동쟁한 존담은 배전적으로 제대바이나 그런 데 말해스 제단은 성근 내부도 또야가 당보면도 초사고 그래 라마 땡고 그래 장바 공고 그래 인지 공고 그래 류게 찬체고 그래 주방 부고로 다이나 텐데게 성근 내부도 또 설백인 줄라 대가랑 토라 냠프샤야 마도베 양지 자기 베나 칸도엔 제안로 다베 텐데게 류나게 지게tun담을 조데바이나 테냐 타와트 라로 텐데인도 자네 타와 뭐 투베 갑틀라 테네 미세게 잡수 카인고 마레스 티인도 자네 제준 멜레게 테네 감보바란 디송도와 테네 차저 첨부 공배체 류나게 잡수 마당시 송도와 다출한테네 차자침부 검제의 값수 르다 나게지 개와라 소바다 근데 저기 자원이나 맞지스 르나게 저주 마당시 뭐도 이시 양년도스 넘버 뭐도 배 이시대양 라로야니 가이거다 스탄지 라메 모테는 모 트바대양 라로야니 가이거레스 다티인도 모 트바테가랑 도로 공고레스 테마도 라메 성분내고 모테서도 소소 모진 투 야테파 용네 지 찬세 주반던 그 간도는 제 릉하게 개전으로 조 제대바이나 단지 라메 모테베게 따와다 라로레스 마도 이시 아니스 테네 부마주 용맹하나 쇼송도와 버스 텐드 섬나다 지금 주진 담을 가야 마다네 섬 용마팅하나 반냠을 샤쇼스 대하 고송에스 위바 템바와 다부로 뭐지 세계로와 대학 고송의 버스는 텐데시는 송도와 대인도 전에 다 자신의 문에 따위게 돈을 선언 당인도 전에 주제에게 되네지다 남을 강연 거야 매바인 바래 어야 주제 전체 접종 망매거스 담부듯이 시행이나
So then verse number 21 says, since the beginning, one's mind is free from elaboration. There is no need for crude watchfulness of the mind, which is elaboration. Remain in a state of transcendent non-grasping of whatever appears, and whatever arises is simultaneously self-liberated. This is my heartfelt advice. So these verses here are speaking about the view. So there's 4 verses, verse number 19, 20, 21, and 22. These 4 verses mainly introduce to the view. And then what follows is the way in which one should sustain meditation upon that view. So, but first we are introduced to the view. So the first point is you have to come to a state of non-grasping. The second point is no antidote is needed. And the third point is that now once you have recognized it, that the mind should remain without elaboration, within the state where whatever arises is simultaneously self-liberated. So if you simply abide within a state wherein whatever arises is liberated upon arising, that is sufficient. So that's the third point on the view. And so then here, when we think about the nature of our mind, so the nature of the mind is primordially without elaboration. So we have a primordial state of mind that is that way, no matter whether the Buddha introduces us to it or not. Though we recognize that or not. So the mind is as it is, primordially, it is unelaborated. So whether we see that or not. And when you look at the essence of the mind and try to see the nature of the mind, if you do so by elaborating upon it, developing all kinds of concepts or thoughts regarding the nature of the mind, this is not at all how the mind will be recognized. So when the mind is in a crude state of a conceptual state, you cannot recognize the nature of the mind. So to recognize the unelaborated natural state of the mind, all that needs to be done is rest within an uncontrived, unaltered state. The moment we start to alter, to contrive and make all sorts of efforts, it will not be accomplished, it will not be realized. So to realize the nature of the mind, first we need to accumulate merit. We need to rely on the guru. We do need to cultivate deliberately love and compassion. And we do engage in activities like prostrations with the body, or we are making offerings. But then now, from the perspective of really practicing Mahamudra, all that needs to be done is just resting within the natural state, with giving up all kinds of other activities, such as reciting prayers or all kinds of virtues activities with body and speech, because it is said in this way we are actually losing our view. So when we are when we introduce to the view and we recognize it, then at that point we do not engage in any other activity, even their virtues. Milarepa said to Gampopa, when you are meditating in a state of Mahamudra, do not engage in do not exert yourself in any virtuous activities, even of body and speech. Give up all these activities. So when you really rest in a state of Mahamudra, one should not even engage in the virtuous activities of body and speech, because that way one will lose the actual view. There's a danger that the Milarepa said, there's a danger that one will lose the primordial awareness of non-conceptuality if one engages in these activities. And then there's a danger that the view one has been introduced to by the guru and one has recognized will be lost. So first you are introduced to it by the guru and you recognize it. And then if you have seen it, but then you do other things instead of meditating. And for example, you do prostrations and you make prayers and you do all kinds of virtuous activities with body and speech, then these essential instructions received by the guru will become lost. So you lose the non-conceptual awareness. That is why Milarepa said to Gampopa, therefore, son, don't lose your awareness, but just rest in this uncontrived, innate, this natural state of mind. And so this uncontrived state means that you don't alter it in any way. It is not changed in any way. So then Milarepa said, have you understood that, son? Just stay within that state. When you rest in Mahamudra, the view of Mahamudra, the uncontrived, unelaborated state is that there is nothing that needs to be actually done, nothing that needs to be contrived. So that is the next heartfelt advice.
Migi Zug Nawa, Nave da Koala Soba Kare, Sharwainaya, Telanganzutani, Zimba Mewachi. Tania, Zimba Mewaina, some de Jena, Ying Somaina, Montiquara, some de Mayomachi. Tendici, Chenetin, Nevaina, some Gingola, now Kare Sharwaina, Sharwa Tegaran, Tortures, Shadrutinum Ko in the means. Tereda, Tindu Naranzo Panachi Namju. Nanganam doing around Peshayando, Sano Kartangusana. And then I did the Wakase. Camera in the Euro, CC camera segment, Songan Chimboda, Saha Chimbona, camera to Euro, Parche. Tanganzunam Jutina Jinita. Deep and a Parche water, no Karinda Chico Shawayana, the Parche could double Jamuro, the Nanjin and around so similar Kang, Shawatenzo, Kang now Atenzo. Zambo Nembata, Kandiji Shawan Tamchela in Zimbashundu. Zimbashundu to Zani, Telatene, Dungen about Natsubachi, Yungurua. The casing around Sogi, G. Similar, Zangin, Namdo, Kandiji Sharswaine, take it Jesu Mandawa Chene, Zimba Majuwaina, Teni Shadru Chandu, Sharwat, Torwatinium Chandu. Pena Sambanaji. Chojigla Samba Unity, Samba Degi Walla, you were Chodegi, Tan some Shingdong Kayungre, some Tulo Red and the Kayungre, some mud down to root in the Kuriungua, in a Samba Degi, Tatering Mekrosong, Sanit and a Shingdong Kurson City, Namto Zawani Marco. Petina Chinchan around so we can't now Kang, Tawa Tensula, Tenikon Zimbabwe Maju Swaina. Then we say Dunghead and Kang Yungu Mare, then is something more to a tortu reserva, Shadrutinium Seazi. I think I'm so let Tambupala Tescala Cabo. Tea in Duzane, Rede Inaya, Nansotaji, Namjun, Zu Zangin, Nazo Nangire, Dazangin, Nazo Kure, Tea in Duzane, Nanzo, Lamsan Namdo Chigre, Chishana, Chabek Namdo Chigre, Chishana Shadang Namdo Chigre. Inaya. The Jewa in Lamsan, Tematadon to Tortumare, let Tamoba. This Jelaya Tortumare, in a Nyima Kashi Jela Tortuva so Gurua. Te Tortusonaya, this Jewere. Did you do Lobon Ludugi, Shitting a Carson Urisana, Nazu Semtela, Besum Shere. Meg Samotantan, Meg Semtela Carriusana, or Tene Dollar Motivananji Chick. Salar Motivananji Chick, Chular Motivananji Chick Sumyungres. Tabana Chular Motijavaina, remote Tizawata, remote Latsava to Yumdo Chanure. Lamsan remote Yendro. Salar Motijavaina, Nimakashi Dere, and Nimakashi Jelado. Dollar Motijavata, Tabar Dere. Dinajin Chidu, Tene Luduga Karasumas Nanzo. Nyumong pe dang namto gi sem nganzola kangen tenging gi sem tenzo chona chula remotiva naji chitu goya pe kechimures chula remotiva naji chet pe kechimures jiwu chagre sumbare tai ne nganzo namju ti chingmare nganzo namju dollar remotiva naji chigre te kangen nyangre da dungen nyangre de te inde da thangbu nganzo dollar remotiva naji ina ya ta kale sal remotiva naji chato so re Namto Tang, Nyomon, Pena Shadan Roy Langina, Nima Kashi Shadan Lana, the Tijin Ada, Kayman, Kokemare, Samadoji. tende kom yalan de zane tende namshi ge tsena shadur dunyam cha tugro shedan jewa da namsa chonro ya tende ya ge samda shedan zawana jeyam ba chang du nyimo zawana jeyam ba cha o tin de zane tende chi cha tu ya la bezun che ya nge ning da mi song do bi za ji go de
So when we at the time when we practice Mahamudra, and we rest in the Mahamudra that is beyond the intellect. So at that time things may appear. So when we see things with our eyes or we hear things with our ears, one should not grasp at whatever appears. And if one doesn't grasp, then one's mind will not become distracted. Meaning that, so even though you might not grasp, you could still in a way be not fully present. So you should be without grasping and without distraction, so fully present. Then if you are able to abide within such a state, then whatever appears to your mind, it will become liberated. You will become liberated within this appearance. It will disappear on its own. So that is the simultaneous liberation and or arising and liberation. So when thoughts appear, as they appear, upon arising, they are already liberated. So that is the hard advice. And so normally, so for how our mind normally functions is, for example, there's these cameras, like surveillance cameras you have like on top of shops or restaurants and so on. So it is just like that. So whatever object comes under the kind of in the field of camera will be captured by the camera, will be recorded by the camera. So whatever appears to the camera will be stored in the camera. And so similarly, in our own mind, whatever appears in our mind or whatever appears to us, but whatever it is, sometimes good things appear, sometimes bad things appear, we always grasp at whatever appears. And this grasping is what leads to all kinds of suffering and problems. So on the other hand, if we would not grasp at or not follow what appears, whatever thought, good or bad, appears in the mind, then the thought will become liberated upon arising. So it's the simultaneous, so whatever arises is simultaneously self-liberated. So for example, if you imagine there's a bridge and there's a river flowing under the bridge, so sometimes the river brings some, flashes by a tree log, sometimes a piece of cloth floats by, sometimes a person floats by, sometimes an animal floats by. But the bridge itself doesn't care what floats by. It doesn't think that, oh, today there was this log, maybe tomorrow it's a person floating by. The bridge doesn't think in this way. It has no grasping, no matter what floats by, whatever arises. So similarly, if we don't fixate on whatever arises completely indiscriminately, then in our life, we will really not experience any suffering. And whatever arises becomes liberated upon arising. So of course, for a beginning practitioner, it is of course a little bit difficult. And so also normally, even though we know that this is how it is, still, whenever we see something or hear something positive or negative, we immediately have some thought about that. We cling to it. Sometimes we become attached, or sometimes we develop angry thoughts. So it's very difficult for a beginning practitioner to just liberate anything that arises as it arises immediately. But it is possible for a beginning practitioner sometimes to liberate it a little bit later, maybe a few days later. It's possible that the anger goes away. And so then when it has become liberated, then you feel a little happy. So also, Nagarjuna had said in the letter to a friend that there are three kind of ways in which we kind of engrave things in our mind. Three kinds of people. So for some, when they think thoughts in their mind, it is like carving an image on a rock. Then for others, it is like drawing an image in the earth. And for others, it is like drawing an image on water. If you draw an image on water, then as you are drawing, the image already disappears. So that drawing and the disappearance of the image occurs simultaneously, so instantly. Then if you draw something on the earth, it may remain there for a few days, but eventually after a few days, it will be gone. But if you carve something in a rock, it will always stay there. And so similarly, when we develop thoughts and afflictive emotions in the mind, as Nagarjuna said, like carving them in a rock, that is why we always encounter all kinds of difficulties in our mind. They're like, because these thoughts are so ingrained, carved into our mind. So therefore, it is important to try to make your mind become like drawing an image on water, because then you will always be happy. So normally, the way we do it is like carving it in a rock. And that is why we encounter so much trouble and suffering. And even though in the beginning it is like carving on a rock, we can still slowly change that. So slowly it can become like drawing an image on earth, and then eventually like drawing on water. And for example, first when you get angry, maybe it may take a few days for the anger to go away. But maybe after a few days, you think that, oh, it's not a big deal, and you can just let go of it. And then eventually, as you keep doing that, eventually the anger arises and is liberated as it arises. And then after that, eventually anger does not even arise anymore. No more, the afflictions just simply don't arise anymore. This is how it becomes ultimately. And so it is the hard advice to make an effort to accomplish that ultimately.
Oh yeah, then you sani badegi chodu nawa sosur megajing tenze mever teji mendangwar kandara nawa teni simjishi babsutroba kuwinhindami tatawa chitere. Tangarang solo namshi chodu sene making namshi nawe namshi lasowa. Tenzola megla zu nangere nawala da kore. In Tonsoma Kagwaya Yomare, Tenzo Gana got Tugumare. Tendu Sosur Kaya Yomares. One at Tene Tenzo and Zimbachigos and Zimbayachi Yomares. Ellen Zimbaya Meva, Tenzo with Jesupa Mandroachene. Tene Kandaran Nawa, Tenis Sundak, Nawa Zani, Contingent Nawa Inaya, Tamjing around so with Simon Naware, Simon Jimbig Nawachi Yomare. Tin Dizane, Kang Nawa Tamja, Simging on the part, Tortovachi Joina. That Tegi, telling us that Nixaware, some Martin, that Niji Chayala, going in the Yins and what is only. Then the Jezum Malala, Malekitane, Pechetanda, Loma, Nyama Lexembum Roa, Telatane, Jonathan, Jona Jing Gom Jabs, Jamson Jing Gom Jab, or Namkan Jing Gom Jabs on you. Tene, Ya, Tene Shune. Tangin namka nanshin gom jab toya des lehla wando sina ya namdo timba nanshin lemna kharchi gores janso nanshin gom jabyat na lehla wando de yina ya balab nanshin namdo chona kharchi gores tane ro nanshin gom jab tosa re de yina ya zishin naksar nanshin namdo chona kharchi gores ya shurwa de shudu zane jezongi de keyo mares tane Timbala so button to Namke Chunturis. Jongan Namka Koran Chungre, Timian Namka Koran Timdoris, Tinto Tonha Machispa, Tinsu Jason Mandangs. Then I seen Balab Jansuki Chunturis. Then I seen Zishing Rogue Chunturis. The Intane, Tensula Mixek in Zimbakan Gumares. Tela Shemba Jeva in Italy, Gang and Take Modern Zimba Meva in Tensuka Gang and Take Marius on the or Tina Shin Chenetane, Ya Tortuviate. going in the means and the song about Andene. That they part of the Tawaki Motriti, song by Sare.
And next is verse number 22. The appearances of the six senses do not cease individually. Without grasping or following after them, whatever appears remains freely in the nature of mind. This is my heartfelt advice. So the appearances of the six senses, so for example, we see things with our eyes, and then we hear things with the ears and so on. So it says, do not cease individually, as in, so there is no need to reject these sense perceptions. There's no need to block the sights and the sounds and so on. So does that mean that it's okay if we just follow them, cling to them? No, obviously not. So we should not cling to them. We should also not follow them. So whatever arises, be it good or bad, is the appearance or the perception of one's own mind. It is no other than one's own mind. It is a projection of one's own mind. And if you are able to become or liberate this appearance or thought as it arises, no matter what arises within the mind, that is all that needs to be done. So that is the heart advice. Also, once Gyaltsen Rinpoche gave a instruction to his disciple Lexapom, and he said, when you meditate on the mind like an ocean, and meditate on the mind like space, like the sky, and meditate on the mind like a mountain. And so then after some time, she came back and reported and said, so when I meditate on mind like space, it comes easy. But what to do when the clouds of thoughts arise? And when I meditate on mind as an ocean, it comes easy. But then what to do when the waves appear in the ocean? And I can meditate on my mind like a mountain, but what when the trees and the bushes of thoughts arise there? And so Milarepa then replied, that is no problem. When you meditate on the mind like space and the clouds appear in space in the sky, see the clouds as nothing but the magical display of the sky itself. The clouds arise from the sky and they dissolve back into the sky. Just don't follow them. Don't pay any attention to the clouds. Just continue to meditate on the sky. And likewise, when you meditate on the ocean and the waves appear, see the waves as the magical display of the ocean and pay no attention to the waves. And likewise, when you meditate on the mind like a mountain and the trees and the bushes appear, see them as the magical display of the mountain and pay no attention to them. Only if you begin to fixate on these arisings, you will encounter difficulties. If you do not fixate, then there will be no difficulty. So therefore, it is my heart advice to liberate all arisings in this way. So up until this point, verse number 22, was an introduction to the view. So then we stop the teachings today and continue tomorrow. Also, the remaining verses are quite easy. So we will be able to finish the teachings tomorrow. And for now, we stop here.
Sunam de tamche ziba ni tomne ni be dana pamche de jega nanche balon chobai sebe tolen rowan rojo.
By this merit, may I attain omniscience, having defeated the enemies, my wrongdoings. May I liberate all beings who are tossed in the ocean of samsara by the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death.
Lama Gunkam Zangwara Surwan Den Chodo Kutse Rinwara Surwan Den Tile Tarjin Jebara Surwan Lama Dan Jalwa Mebara Shinje Lo.
I pray for the excellent health of the Guru. I pray that he lives a supremely long life. I pray that his activities spread far and wide. Grant blessings that I may not be separate from my Guru.
Jambe Bawe Jedra Jimba Dan Gundo Sambo Deyang Dejinde Teda Kunje Jizo Dalo Jir Gewan Deda Damje Rando.
Just as the hero Manjushri realized things as they are, and as did Samantabhadra too, I will follow in their path and perfectly dedicate all these virtues.
Sanje Kusumani Be Chenlab Dan Chuni Minjur Dembe Chenlab Gendun Meche Dembe Chenlab Je Chedra Huje Mhalan Drumbar Sho.
By the blessing of the Buddha who attained the three kayas, by the blessing of the truth of the unchanging nature of reality, and by the blessing of the undivided Sangha community, may my prayers be fulfilled according to this dedication.
Dadang Kunde Tham Jeje Dusumdo Soba Tham Yube Gewe Zawande Dadang Simchen Thamje Nyurdo Lana Me Yang Dabara Zobe Chanchu Rinpoche Tobara Jurunje.
By the virtues accumulated in the three times by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the intrinsic root of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious awakening.
Sheja Gunze Gunchen Chuje Je Dendra Nela Wanto Ndrigon Bah Rinchen Barje Temba Sinte Bar Shedu Tusam Gombe Zenjuro Je.
May the teachings of the great Rigungpa Ratna Shri, Master of Interdependence, Omniscient Lord of Dharma, who has seen all knowable things, be upheld until the end of cyclic existence through study, practice, hearing, contemplation, and meditation.
Chanju Samjo Rinpoche Maje Panam Jejuro Je Jeba Nyamba Meba Kone Kondo Pever Sho.
May Bodhicitta, the precious and supreme mind, arise in whom it has not yet arisen. Where it has arisen, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher.
Hola, so tani tuji che tani ngado yang sanyi gonda tani je yong tani tsangma tashi dele.
So thank you and see you on tomorrow evening and Dashi Dele to everyone.
Gặp lại chúng ta vào ngày mai.
Thank you, Khenchen La. Bye bye. See you tomorrow.
Thank you. Bye bye. See you tomorrow.